Welcome everyone to the Reading Revellers series. It's an ongoing series by the Reading Revellers, which is a reading club, book club based out of Vancouver, and the Reading Revellers is our online extension. And we've been doing this podcast kind of programs for a while now, and we look forward to continue doing this. So if this is something that excites you, to join a forum and have a discussion, bring up your own topics if you'd like to discuss and share with us. So you're more than welcome to do so. Today, for this program, we have invited Dr. Ambika Adhikari. He's based off of Arizona in the United States. He's an urban planner, a city planner for the city of Tempe. For his further introduction and this whole program will be hosted by Mr. Suresh Bhatta, and he brings his own global experience in infrastructure development, including urban transportation programs, in hosting this session. His international projects have won Canadian Service Export Awards. Suresh also has been guest speaker, panelist, and moderator at different international development events, and has organized Canadian federal level programs and province level programs in Alberta, British Columbia, and Ontario, and also in several other financial institutions. So with this, I'd like to pass on to Suresh Bhatta and Ambika sir to take this program forward. Just the minor etiquettes for this program would be, please keep your questions in the chat so that we could organize them and present to our speakers for today. And at the end of the program, we'll have a Q&A session, and you can feel free to turn your cameras on and ask your questions by yourself, or Suresh sir will follow through your questions either in a debriefed version or in some ways. He will manage that. I'll be here to help you with any other logistics, so feel free to send me a message in private if you have any issues. Henceforth, Suresh sir and Ambika sir, it's yours.
Thank you, Bikramji. Thank you very much. Hello, greetings everyone. Good evening and good morning, or good to whatever time of the day it may be. And thank you indeed for sparing your next 90 minutes. I'm sure, rest assured, this will be very interesting and stimulating session that we have with us here. But first, before we get into the subject matter, if I may ask you to please be a little bit of nostalgic and think about the place that you grew up. I mean, chances are that you probably fall into one of these three broad categories. The first one could be somewhat of a rural setting with perhaps minimal amenities, but in a very, very comforting setting. You probably did not know any stranger. Everyone you knew, where you knew them, or you might have been extended family or the relatives for as far as you can know. It's a comfort zone. Or the second one could be it could be a core city, or in any city where the amenities were probably not an issue, but you probably did not know, you most likely didn't know all the people and all the neighbors. However, there was some kind of a degree of affinity. You could at least associate the individuals with their kind of a dwelling, or that person living in that big house and a little bit of a, stiff upper lip kind of a person and so forth. Anyway, but also while growing up in the city, maybe in your time, there was still a lot of open spaces. You could freely play and on the street and bike around and wheel around without being too scared of various hazards. Or the third setting could be that one of those newly developing townships, or the large villages or the townships that were emerging, which on one hand may be a happening place, probably sort of wide streets being built, new constructions happening every day, but you also did not know where the next neighbor was coming in, and the place probably did not have much of an sort of identity or sort of its architect yet, because it was a new thing happening. Now, I mean, this is very generalization, of course. Now, think about now what those places look like, and are you bewildered? Are you happy the way they, developed since your childhood when you grew up? Or you dread to think what is going to happen to them come future? I mean, I have those places become uninhabitable, or they have become a wonderful, maybe the rural settings have gone. So keep that in mind, because some of those questions you maybe have sort of, the vexing questions I say, that you may be thinking, why it happened a certain this way? Why wasn't it done the other way? Or what could have been done better? You certainly are in the right place at the right time for this evening. You're likely to get a lot of information, and uh, from our guest speaker, you'll be hearing about that. Okay? So tonight's topic is basically smart cities in Nepal, understanding the concept of a smart city in the broader context of the sustainability, and also looking somewhat closely into the opportunities and the challenges that the Nepalese cities have to deal with. So, without meaning to take advantage of my host duties, I know you all are eagerly waiting for our speaker to speak, but also just to take a briefly, I may just share with you my own conundrum in this subject. I mean, so therefore, I'm quite excited about the program today, because my conundrums are, for example, what is the concept of the smart city? Where does it fit into those things? And very briefly going to the history, I mean, to the best, as far as I know, I'm not a subject matter expert on this, but the cities are a relative in human evolution, fairly new concept, just over 5 to 7,000 years. But within that 5 to 7,000 years, according to the United Nations 2018 data, about 55% of the world's population now live in urban centers or cities. By the way, I will be using the term cities and urban centers somewhat interchangeably, even though that may not be a strictly applicable technical definition, but please bear with me for this evening. We'll be using fairly interchangeably. So the more than half of world's people live in the city. By the way, same data says that Nepal is close to 20%, so it is not yet there in that extent. But the point is that in the present context, cities do actually define us. They are our best and they are our worst. They define us to the extent of even stereotyping. If you tell somebody that I'm from Amsterdam, there's some kind of a sort of thing people tend to associate. Oh, you live in a very sustainable one, or sort of non-motorized transport you use. Or if you say from, I don't know, in few years, about 10 years ago, if you said I'm from Detroit, it might have been sort of, looked at differently. So it kind of a stereotypes, when you say where you come from the city. So that's why cities are part of us now, and cities are also, by the same extension, they're no different than us. They breathe and they live. So we got to take care of the cities as much as we have to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, they simply will decay. And on top of that, come to think of the sort of, the changing climate, the environment, and so forth. How are the cities going to cope? So, when I said earlier, my conundrum, for example, is that with the continued pressure on the cities, the growing demand from the cities, how are they to keep developing and catering the need of us, and at the same time to retain the sort of their heritage and the architect and sort of their identity? I mean, how are cities to achieve that? That's one. The second thing is that in that context, in the challenge, this concept of the smart cities this is sort of a new paradigm that we have to now learn, or we have to think, or is it just a sort of, an adjective for a common sense approach to science that was already in there, or is it something entirely different? And somewhat, again, in a narrower sense, the cities in Nepal, and again, as I said earlier, you can relate to your own personal sort of experiences. Those cities in Nepal, I mean, do they have opportunities in their hand, or are they faced with a huge, huge monumental challenge? Okay. So to enlighten us on all these profound questions, returning with us today is our one esteemed TRR member, Dr. Ambika P Adhikari from Phoenix, Arizona. For those of you who don't know him, Ambika sir, as I prefer to call him, however, he doesn't like it, so we have settled for Ambika ji. He received his Doctor of Design degree from Harvard University. It was preceded by Master of Architecture from the University of Hawaii, and also a postgraduate fellowship at another prestigious university, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is a member of American Institute of Certified Planners, AICP. Ambika has over 37 years of professional and academic experience in urban and environmental planning in several countries, including United States, Canada, Mexico, Kenya, Fiji, India, and Nepal. He has earlier served as a Nepal country representative for the Switzerland-based International Union of Conservation of Nature, IUCN. Also earlier in Nepal, he was an associate professor in architecture at the Institute of Engineering. Dr. Adhikari has published several articles in peer-reviewed journals and has authored books and book chapters. Currently, Ambika is a principal planner at the city of Tempe in Metro Phoenix, heading its long-range planning division. And earlier, he was research professor at Arizona State University. And on the Nepalese side, he is a distinguished fellow of IIDS, Institute of Integrated Development Studies, a prestigious independent think tank with many years of history. Dr. Adhikari has extensive experience about incorporating sustainability principles in urban planning and economic development programs in cities of both developed and developing countries. So without much further ado, please join me in welcoming our distinguished guest of the evening, an accomplished speaker in international arena, Dr. Ambika Adhikari, to talk about smart cities in Nepal, concepts, opportunities, and challenges. Dr. Adhikari, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sureshji. Thank you so much, Bikramji. That's a very humbling introduction. I don't know if I can really live up to that, but thank you so much for your very kind words. I've been around, so it's a long time, and then I've gathered just a few, I guess, sentences on my bio, but they don't always mean anything. But I'm very, very honored and privileged to be speaking today. This was a great invitation. I have been part of the Reading Revellers for many, many years, and I've enjoyed whenever I could join. So this is a great opportunity to talk about a subject that I kind of care about and I love about. So with that, I have some slides because it's always easier, especially when I have data and information, to go into the slides. So I'm going to be sharing some slides and starting from that. But before that, I did want to say that the idea of the smart city, Sureshji, you very correctly mentioned, it could be fad, it could mean everything, it could mean nothing. It's a word, just like people are smart. That means they are like a little more efficient. They respond to things very quickly. They learn, they understand, they act in real time. And we have smartphones like this, right? I mean, which really help us on with a lot of information. So it has to do with efficiency and information and so on. So you're absolutely right. It's a lot more commonsensical term. So I will try to delve into that with the help of some slides that I have. So let me start with this. So you can see.
Yes, it's all good.
Wonderful. Okay, so once again, thank you so much. So you'll see a lot of pictures in the slides are actually by me. These days we have the phone, so we take pictures everywhere. The picture on the left is of Kathmandu that I took maybe 5-6 years ago. The picture on the right is of Phoenix, Arizona, just to kind of show the difference between how spaces are managed, how the urban forms are managed. And so you'll see a lot of pictures that I've taken across the slides, and there will be a few that I have taken from the web. So with that, what I want to cover today is a number of things. And Sureshji and Bikramji have kindly given me quite a bit of time. And being an urban planner and also someone who likes to talk, and also having been a teacher for a long time, both in Nepal and also in the US and also in Canada, I sometimes tend to talk a lot. So I'm very happy that I got this kind of time. The objective of my presentation today is going to be providing you an overview of the global urbanization, so that I am going to set the stage for talking about Nepal. Then I will get into the urban development in Nepal. I have a little bit of a few slides, some data, and some anecdotal stuff and some pictures. And then, like Sureshji and Bikramji asked me to do, I will delve into the smart city, the meaning of it, and what are the approaches that people follow in achieving the smart city. And then we'll get into the opportunities and challenges. connected to the smart cities. And then we'll look into some prognosis and recommendations for Nepal. So that's the objective today. So let's get into the urbanization from the global perspective. I always like these global perspective numbers because, just like how the universe is very big and the earth seems so small in the scheme of things. And then when you look at the whole world, the world is very big also. And then whatever we do sometimes in the scheme of things is pretty small and humbling and manageable. So in November 2022, the world population is projected to reach $8 billion according to the United Nations. Right now, we are $7.9 billion. So $8 billion is an easy number. So let's look at that number. Now, the population annual growth rate globally, according to the World Bank in 2021, is 0.9%, slightly less than 1%. It used to be 1.2%, 1.1%, 1%, and the rate of growth is declining. But even now, it's close to 1%. That actually gives us annual population growth globally of about 72 million people. Now, think of that. That's a very large number. That's 10% more than the population of the United Kingdom, which is a significant country. So each year, that is the number of people that are being added to the global population. If we divide that by 365, we get about 228,000 people growth per year. So if I talk to you tomorrow at 8 o'clock my Phoenix time, there will be additional 228,000 people in this world. Think of that. And remember this number. This number is going to be very interesting from other perspective also. And that is I like to, as an urban planner and also a previous architect, I like to visualize things. And that number is equivalent to slightly more than the 2021 population of Biratnagar. You remember that we just had a census in Nepal in 2021. The population in Biratnagar was 244,000. People who've been to Biratnagar can visualize and can estimate how many people is 228,000 people. It's a lot of people. It's almost like one Biratnagar every day in 24 hours that's being added. And in a week, 1.5 million people globally move to the cities. And why I said 228,000 is a very interesting number. The 1.5 million people globally that move to the city every week, that comes to about 200,000 people every day. So all the population growth on the daily basis or on the annual basis is actually, that's what the cities are increasing by. So the total population growth that's happening is basically happening in the growth of the city. So it's very important in terms of planning, providing infrastructure, providing housing, providing water supply, providing jobs to the cities, because it's a very important number. So for planners, architects, engineers, economists, anthropologists, politicians, and so on, this is what they need to do. They need to think of providing housing, infrastructure, roads, and everything for 228,000 people every day, or one UK every year. So the rate of the global urban population is about 2%, and you will see that that's also approximately the rate of growth in Nepal in terms of urban population. Now, the vast majority of all this growth, I'm talking about these numbers because almost all of it, 95% of it, is happening in developing countries. Like in Nepal, most of South Asia, in Africa, parts of Latin America, and some islands. So the management and infrastructure and all that planning that has to happen in the developing countries is significant, and it's actually colossal. Now, let's look at some of the big cities. This is the 2020 population estimate by the United Nations prospects. You will see that the top 15 countries, 15 cities are very large. Actually, the larger Tokyo metropolitan area is about 37 million. That's bigger than many, many countries. Delhi is more than 30 million, and so on. And in this population range, you will see that there are three columns which have orange color. That is Tokyo, Osaka, New York, and Newark. Those are the only big cities that are in the developed world, which can provide infrastructure and planning and resources and all that. The rest of all the biggest cities, the biggest 15 cities, 12 12 out of the top 15 cities in the world are in the developing world. And as you know, in the developing world, there's a lack of resources, there's a lack of manpower, political will, systems, and all of that, institutions and all of that. So it's really hard to manage. On the right side, you'll see two pictures. These are courtesy of the UN. The picture on top is Caracas, Venezuela. We read a lot about Venezuela these days. You'll see a highway. On the right side is the formal settlement. On the left side, that informal settlement. And the picture down below is Sao Paulo, Brazil, the largest city in Brazil. On the right side is a formal settlement with people in the high rises, even in their balconies. They've got the swimming pool. On the left side are the favelas, are the slums. I'm showing these pictures because I talked about that previous number, all that growth of 228,000 people per year or 72 million per year. That's many of the people end up on those slums or favelas or those kind of things. That's where this planning becomes very, very important. Okay, so in terms of the planning and going into the smart kind of phenomena, one thing is the density. You know, when you come to the city, you increase the density. That's one of the definitions of the city, because in the rural areas, the density of population, of the density of the dwelling unit per acre or hectare is very, very low, because they have to have a land to provide agriculture and, you know, feed from there. Whereas in the cities, you have to live in a compact manner to optimize the infrastructure, to make the city life possible, to have transportation possible, to have the economy of scale. It's always, density is very important. So many cities, even the big cities, have different range of densities, all the way from Atlanta, which has only 1,500 people per square mile, and to all the way to Manila and Mumbai, which are like up to 108,000 people per square mile. And the Kathmandu proper, the city of Kathmandu, is about 55,000 people per square mile. So we're somewhere in the middle, but we are very dense. And this is, you will see that this is one of the indicators. You have to be dense, but sometimes you cannot be too dense. You just have to be optimally dense, and you have to manage and organize. So this is one overview that I wanted to show you. This is a very small slide. I follow Alain Berthoud. I used to know him. He worked in the World Bank. Right now, he teaches at New York University. He's a French urban planner, and he is just astounding and amazing person. And then he creates a lot of data points and information. This is something that he did in 2012 of the 58 metropolitan cities. He calculated the densities of those cities all the way from Atlanta to Mumbai, and then he color-coded them by different regions. It's something that the slides probably will be available to you later on. Just wanted to show you that. And I'm making all of this background to talk about a few things when we talk about smart cities. And then on the same scale, you will see Atlanta on the top, on the left side, with 2.5 million people. And you'll see Barcelona, Spain, at the bottom left-hand side with 2.8 million people, same scale. So you can see how you can more efficiently, people want to go to Barcelona. People want to live in Barcelona. Barcelona is one of the best cities in the world. It is one of the, architecturally and planning-wise, one of the best well-managed cities in the world. Atlanta is also a good city. It's a very rich city. You know, it's in the US, in Georgia, but you don't have to be that spread out to be smart. And then on the right side is more recent picture from the UN. It's a picture of Mumbai. So the bottom half is the informal settlement where people are squatting. It's like a public land. And the top half is the actual apartments and formal settlement where people own their property and homes, and then see how they are well organized. And there is infrastructure and greenery and all that stuff. So this is like a visual representation of the footprint of the city and how cities could be managed. Now let's go very quickly to the urban development in Nepal and the capital region. Now, this is the World Bank information that in 2021, the urban population in Nepal, according to the World Bank, was 21%. And that's what I think Suresh was referring to. But the census 2021 of Nepal actually showed the urban population of Nepal is 66%. And I looked at some of the census data and some of the numbers, and it's very interesting. They try to agglomerate group of population and call them urban, and typically there are more than 30,000 people in one area. They may not have the urban infrastructure, urban character, or urban system, or even the fabric, but because it's an agglomeration of many of the location of the population, they call it urban. And as you know, the 2015 Constitution of Nepal kind of restructured the geography of Nepal. So based on that, by Nepalese definition, the urban population is 66%. But urban means you have infrastructure, there has to be innovation, there has to be some sort of density and urban land value, manufacturing and economic activities, all of that. The World Bank thinks we have 21%. The reality might be somewhere in between, but I wanted to show you both of those data. Now, also, there is a very interesting growth in Kathmandu and the surrounding. The 2021 census, which just came out, shows that the valley population is about 3 million. I always used to estimate it a little higher. Maybe it's even higher because census doesn't capture the floating population. Census captures the people who actually live on any one of those dwelling units in the valley. But even 3 million is a very large population. As you know, countries like Finland are probably 4.5 million people, and so are New Zealand. So, 3 million people or 3.5 million people is a very large number. And the population growth rate in Kathmandu, now from the global, let's zoom into the Kathmandu Valley growth rate. The growth rate between 2011 to 2021, average growth rate has been 50,000 people per year. Again, I wanted to compare that to a Bhaktapur's population of 78,000 in 2021 census. Why am I giving you these numbers? Is the Kathmandu planners, people like Balen and the government and so on, have to actually manage almost a population of Bhaktapur every year, feed them, house them, water supply them, have sanitation, have drainage, have housing, have economy, have jobs, have sidewalks. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes on. That's why we read a lot of news about tensions and problems about sidewalks and Kathmandu, and someone like Balen had to really come to rescue it all. That's because all these numbers tell you that every year, in addition to managing the people who are existing, you have to manage all of these additional people. But I talked about density before. The density is the sustainable aspect of the city. It provides you compactness. It arrests sprawl like in Phoenix and LA. Don't be like Phoenix. Don't be like LA. Don't be like Atlanta. Be like Barcelona. Be like, actually, even Kathmandu. Be like London. So that gives efficiency in infrastructure, and then also saves agricultural land. And all of them will become input into the smart cities that I'll come to. And so very briefly, I have only one slide. One of the ways that we really need some smartness in the city is also to manage the environment so that people can have a good quality of life. And Kathmandu Valley, as everyone knows, is one of the most polluted places on earth. Probably it will be in top 10 at any time. Delhi is really bad. Many cities in China are bad, but they're getting better. But in Nepal, we've got a lot of really highly polluted cities, and becoming smart is very important for that. There is a visual that is from JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, and the World Bank data. It's an interesting visual from 1967 to the top left to 2011 to the bottom right. I don't have a data for 2021. We can probably get it somewhere. But you can see the red part is the one that is the actual urban population. The yellow is the agricultural settlement and so on, which are livable, habitable. The green part is the actually mountains and hills. And you can see how rapidly Kathmandu has grown in the last 50 years, and it's almost filled up. So we need to really manage, and we need to become smart. That's a real good visual representation. Now, I also want to go, before I actually delve into the smartness, I also want to go to the Sustainable Development Goals that were promulgated in 2015 by the United Nations. And we planners and many of the governments use the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them, to really chart out the development patterns and plans and policy. Now, the one that is really close to the smart city concept is the Sustainable Development Goal number 11. It reads, SDG 11 aims to renew and plan cities and other human settlements in a way that offers opportunities for all, with access to basic services, energy, housing, transportation, and green public spaces, while reducing resource use and environmental impact. Of course, it's a UN language, it's a little generic, it's high level, but it's very important. It does tell a lot of things, especially when you think of all the numbers that I showed you before. If you have to provide opportunities for all of these people, 200,000 people that move to the city every day, and if you have to provide services, energy, housing, transportation, public space, and so on, it's a daunting task. That's why smart cities and the urban planning is very important. Now, let's very quickly look at the utilities and infrastructure. Let's see. So that was the UN goals. Just wanted to kind of give some initial ideas about where Kathmandu is. Kathmandu, the annual rainfall in average is 55 inch. And then that compares to the place that I live, which is desert, only 8.5 inch. This all I will talk about water harvesting when we come into the smartness. And then I also wanted to kind of define what is a low impact development, LID. It is basically minimizing the impact of the development into the environmental and the earth system. The solar photovoltaic, passive solar deployment, increased broadband spend, all of these are very important elements of the smart cities that I'll come to. And then also, let's talk very briefly about transportation and connectivity. These are also very important on what happens to smartness and the cities and so on. The connectivities are very important. The picture that you see above is Ahmedabad, where there's like a rapid bus system. And then down below is in Kathmandu in 2015. And so after the SDG goal, the smart cities are basically a combination of 3 or 4 very important things. One is they are data driven. They have the information in the real time. They have sensors and they have places to collect things, and they have cameras, and they have many other gadgets that collect the information in the real time. The other thing that happens in the smart city is called IoT, in the Internet of Things. So Internet of Things is, we all know Internet. We can't live without Internet even for a minute these days. And we also know things. So things are the actual physical stuff. This is why it's a technical term, but it's a very interesting technical term. It's Internet of Things. So the smart cities are based on the idea of connecting and providing the internet to the physical objects like the parking area, the parking mirror, the traffic lights, the building envelope, the photovoltaic sensors, the street lights. All of these are connected to the Internet of Things. So that's another thing. And so in the scheme of the smart city ideas, there is an idea about infrastructure and utilities, which can be passive things. That is something that you build and you don't really have to provide any energy to do it. Something like landscaping and trees and swales and low impact development. And then also active things like the solar energy, the actual handling of the data and information, and then installation of the solar system and all that. So those are the 2 different types of things in the smart city concept. The other things on the smart city concepts are the transportation and connectivity, because the more you only have cars, just like we have in Phoenix or LA or many other, even in Toronto and Vancouver, it's hard to become smart, because smart has to be lean. Smart has to be efficient. Smart has to respond to many, many things very quickly. Smart has to be sustainable. And single car occupancy is not the best way. Of course, it's very important. It will remain with us for a long time. But we have to think of reducing the single-use occupancy vehicles and go into the public transit, and also make the kind of hybrid information There's also in smart city, there's also a concept called 15 or 20-minute city. It actually started with Paris. They call themselves a 15-minute city. What that means is any place that you live within 15 minutes of walking or biking or transit, not by car, you should be able to access schools, shopping, recreation, anything that's in our daily use except for work. So that really will help everyone reduce the commuting time and leave more time to the people to make the city smart. So that 15-minute city concept then became 20-minute city concept in Melbourne. And now Tempe is also a 20-minute city. Many cities in Canada now called 20 minutes because they do want to provide services in every place around. This is something that we are actually pretty rich in places like do. Almost there is like a economy and shoppings and all of that area pretty close by. And let's see. Now let's revisit. There is a definition. There is no like universally known definition of the smart city. There are few really good ones. And myself and Professor Keshav Bhattrai of University of Missouri, we just published an article towards smart city in Nepal in the Journal of Nepal Journal of Science and Technology. And we quoted one of the definitions from Nam and Bhadro. I think this is a pretty comprehensive definition. A smarter city infuses information into its physical infrastructure to improve conveniences, facilitate mobility, add efficiencies, conserve energy, improve the quality of air and water, identify problems and fix them quickly, recover rapidly from disasters, collect data to make better decisions, deploy resources effectively. I think this gives a pretty comprehensive idea about what the smart city is. And the picture on the right that you see, one is the micro estates. There's like a micro housing. This is in Tempe that I took a picture of. The one down below is another building in Tempe, which is a 3D printed homes. I actually went to that house, and if we have time, we'll talk about that a little bit. These days, the computer can actually print a building. So, that's pretty smart. Okay, so the smart cities then again are livable, are sustainable. These are all the same things. Smart city has to be sustainable. Otherwise, it's not smart. If it dies very young age, it's not smart. If it's not livable, it's not smart. So it does have to have clean air, water, affordable housing, a lot of employment opportunities, and it has to be pedestrian friendly. Again, the 15-minute city concept really gives you idea that you can walk and bike, and then be compact. Like I give you an example of Barcelona. And it has to be connected, and it has to have clean energy, water conservation, and I'll talk a little more about that later on. You'll see some pictures, some really good examples. Wherever I go, being a planner is also a boon and also a curse. I end up taking pictures of sidewalks. The one on top is Honolulu, it's a great sidewalk in Waikiki. The one down below is the city in Phoenix, another shaded sidewalk. And to make a city livable, sustainable, and smart, there are some ideas by Brent Hodrian, who is really a planner in Vancouver. By the way, in the scheme of things, Vancouver is one of the avant-garde cities in all kinds of smartness and urban planning. Although the smartest city these days are counted as Seoul and Taipei and Osaka and Auckland and Melbourne and New York and London and Helsinki, but this livability and that system is extremely important, and Vancouver is still a good example. It has few things to overcome, but still a good example. So he lists a number of things, and among the many things that he lists, he talks about it's not only physical smartness. You got to have a really nice place to live. It has to be participatory. It has to be just. It has to be beautiful. It should preserve historic resources. A number of things. I'm not going to read all the slides, but the idea is it has to have a character. It has to really celebrate its tradition. There are some cities in Mexico, when the Mexico government and the state government wanted them to become smart and have some Internet of Things, they did not, the local population didn't allow that because it was very beautiful. Who wants like Venice or Florence to be smart? If they are good the way they are, right? You can probably improve a few things, but you also want to have that beauty. That's part of the smartness. The graphic out here is for two-car parking, and for two-bedroom units, you actually need the same amount of space, about 670 square feet. There are some images from Tempe on making a smart city work. There's the Internet of Things that I explained earlier, the real-time data that I explained with cameras, sensors, and mobile phones. The continuous feedback on what actually is happening so that we can make a decision in real time, make like parking or the traffic flow according to the real time, and also use maybe the public open spaces or provide the energy and the water supply system where it is needed based on the actual information you get on that particular moment. So those are the continuous feedback mechanism are very important. Some examples, the traffic lights, the non-smart traffic lights are pre-programmed for how many seconds, depending on the time of the day. The smart city lights actually read how many people are crossing, how many cars are coming, and they adjust their time in terms of red light and green light accordingly. Same thing, if you drive to any of the airport these days, you know that you don't have to drive to all the floors. It will tell you which floors are open, where there's an open space for parking. That's all kind of smart sensors are telling you. Actually, these days on the smart cities, even the street parking, they have sensors and they can tell you that, okay, here is one opening that you can go and drive. So if you have that app on your phone in the car, you can actually go directly, because a lot of time is otherwise spent on circling around the parking spaces. So one example after the pandemic, the pictures down below is in a park where there's a hand washing station. So these are all really some of the elements of the smart city. There are some more pictures from Tempe transit and also how a shaded walkway, because we go up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit here in summer. That is almost 50 degrees Celsius. And it's a very hot place. So shading is very important. And you can use the shading, and you can also have the solar panels on top of that, like you see the examples out here. So those elements, the Internet of Things elements, are extremely important. But inclusiveness, just cities, and sustainability are also equally important. Now, let me go into the two things that I talked very briefly before. In the smart infrastructure, one is passive. Passive is something really easy to do. We were very good in Nepal in doing that earlier on. This is something, once you do it, it's an investment. You can provide a shade, solar control, make it walkable, have green infrastructure, water harvesting, all of these things. You don't need to have external energy, pumps, and all of that kind of thing. You can just do it passively. It's there. Once you do it, it's there. You can even have green walls. And then smart infrastructure also includes active systems, the sensor-driven utility flows that I talked about, the Internet of Things, smart grids for electricity, and the distributed solar PV, street light sensors that will go on only when it is dark. Most of it is already happening in many places. There is no fully smart city in the world. Even Helsinki or Auckland are not 100% smart. But even Kathmandu or even Viratnagar are partially smart. So I live in Tempe, which is pretty smart city, but I would say, some elements are smart, some elements are still traditional. So many of these elements you'll see are kind of incremental. Smartness is incremental. On the picture that you see above is the hand washing station after the pandemic. Down below is the sensor for the pollution level, so it can tell you in real time how the pollution is. And open space also becomes very important. Suresh briefly talked about that earlier on. This is one of the things that anyone who lives in Kathmandu and many of the Nepalese cities appreciate, because we are killing all the open spaces. It's really bad. The Frederick Law Olmsted, the father of the landscape architecture in America, used to say that the parks are the lungs of the city. They help the city breathe. So we need open spaces. There is one where we used to work, both Suresh and myself. We went to Institute of Engineering. That's one of the rare open spaces in Pulchok. The one down below is from Oahu Island in Hawaii. It's more of a therapeutic type of garden. There's so many good, fantastic open spaces there. So are in Canada, in the US, and many other countries. There are some standards on how to make a city smart within a 5-minute walk, what kind of areas to provide. There are standards that I've written out here. These standards are very high in the US. They could be organized for other countries like 50 to 60 square feet per person, 100 square feet per person. And that therapeutic gardens are very important. People are stressed out in the city, and it cannot be a smart city if the people become fatigued and stressed out, you need open spaces and you need really nice places to enjoy the city and make it smart. Now, what are the opportunities and challenges? The international experience in smart city is actually mixed. So as much as Nepalese leaders and mayors and the governments and even Prime Minister Modi in India talk about smart cities are not always the answers. And a smart city doesn't always work very well. I give you one example of Mexico. There's another example in Toronto. Google, the Alphabet company, actually wanted to do the smart sidewalk. They invested, I think, $2 billion next to the, you can see the picture on the right side. Again, all these pictures are mine. The Lake Ontario. They had to forego that. They had to scrap it, pull the plug, because people were concerned about the privacy. Because, you know, when you put the sensors on camera, a lot of things that you do would be known to everyone. So it's not always easy. The picture down below is Mazda City in Abu Dhabi. Again, I've been there. It was created as a smart city, but that also something that didn't work. It is far away. People have to take a car to go there. And even inside there, although they try to build it, it's smart, it didn't work very well. But, you know, there are some cities which have thrived. Seoul, Singapore, Taipei, Toronto, Chicago, London, Mazda, by and large. And Auckland, you know, they have thrived by and large. The Toronto and Mazda City had those exceptions, but they're okay. The Santa Maria Tonantzilla in Mexico, they didn't want a smart city because it was such a beautiful traditional old place, like Bhaktapur. You know, Bhaktapur has its own charm. You do want to make the infrastructure smart, but you want to leave it alone. It's beautiful. So you got to think of the smart city as not a cure-all. And the technology limits are also, not, they always have limitations. So can Nepali cities be made smart? With the poor state of infrastructure, of course, you got to start with really basic things in Nepal. Otherwise, you talk about smartness and there are potholes in the street, not a great idea. And then the level and reach of technology in Nepal is still minimal, but there are also a lot of things that are coming along. So I just read in one of the papers that there is 136% penetration of cell phone in Nepal in 2000, that's a typo, 2021. The 136%, I think they calculated by number of SIM cards. Very often people have more than one SIM cards and people have a business phone and, you know, extra phone. So there are more phones than the population there. And the internet and computing is also accelerating, which is helpful to make the city smart. And we already read about traffic management and parking and utility provision in Kathmandu. There are some smart elements that the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and other places are pressing. So, you know, that's something that is doable. Same thing with the energy distribution and smart grids. This is also can be very well utilized. So there are lots of good possibilities. Now, let's go to the final one or two. I think this is my final one or two slides. How does it look for a smart city thing in Nepal? What is the prognosis? It's a newly urbanizing country, so it's actually a very good situation because you can learn from other people's mistakes. You know, what happened in Toronto, what happened in Mazda City, we can learn from there. The hill situation is always helpful to make a city smart because drainage is almost naturally taken care of. Natural beauty is naturally taken care of. So many things are done by gravity. And Nepal has a very rich history of good traditional planning and design, which is a great thing that I just talked about. That's the really passive part of the smart design that we can all enjoy. And I admire the statement by Mayor Balin in Kathmandu. He talks about actually conserving and preserving all the good things that we have. And also the thing that we teach and we learn and we write about here in America and Canada about mixed use, narrow streets, open plazas, cultural resources, tacit guidelines. Those are something that we read and we teach and we promote here in America. This is something that we already have in Nepal. We have mixed use, we have narrow streets, which are really great. We have open plazas, we have cultural assets, we have, you know, tacit GOMS and guidelines. So Nepal has done reasonably well on the sustainable development guidelines. And I think smart city elements can really help us on going into that. Some of the things that we talked about, the passive element, water harvesting, solar ideas, implementing in some of the selected areas like the transportation and traffic, I think that will help. Now let's go into a couple of quick recommendations. On the right, you'll see some pictures because there's only 8.5 inches of rain here. There are some pictures I took here in Tempe of how rainwater is actually redirected directly to the landscaping so that you don't have to, because all this landscaping here is done artificially. There's no water. You have to bring water from Colorado River and then grow plants, but you can use whenever it rains, you can use the redirect. We can do a lot of that. Professor Patrai and myself, we just published another paper on groundwater recharging in Kathmandu. It's published on the Nepal Public Policy Review Journal just about 2 weeks ago. And we go into a lot more detail on how to water harvest, how to recharge the water, and how to do all of that thing for Kathmandu. So for some recommendation, first of all, we would need to improve basic urban infrastructure in Kathmandu and other cities in Nepal. We all know that. It's already happening. And we got to start with passive elements. So these are the low-hanging fruits in the economist terms. Urban forestry, permeable paving, solar photovoltaic, rainwater harvesting, using daylight, solar controls, all of these things are kind of free. The nature gives us free, right? So we start with that. We make the best use of that. We optimize, we do a good design, and then utilize the smart technology. We already have a lot of apps, and then we can use apps. And again, Professor Bhatta have written another article about the bus rapid transit and making Nepali cities smart. You can have the app to really tell you when the buses are coming, where it stops, and where is the traffic jam. All of that thing with the artificial intelligence will make the city much more smart. Then parking, of course, is a very easy way to implement the smart system. The traffic lights and pedestrian system, it's very easy to implement this system. And electric vehicles, I think it's already talked about. Electric vehicles are two-edged swords because they're very expensive. There is an initial cost, there is a charging infrastructure unit, but in the long run, that's the way to go. And that's what is happening here in North America too. And then the pollution measurement, Nepal is doing a good job, but just like I showed you in Gandhinagar, real time you flash. That's what they do here in Phoenix. The quality here is very bad, but there's a flash. It tells you what is the pollution level, ozone level at any time in many places, asks you to take a bus or transit or bike and not drive. Those are the kind of thing that makes the city smart. And then popularize the e-governance, which Nepal is doing a great job. So in short, the smart city concept in Nepal is viable. We got to do it one thing at a time. We got to do it selectively. We have to start with the passive elements. We got to optimize the good things that we already have. And then we got to learn from other places. And then a few of these things that I talked about can be done. So urbanization, Suresh talked about, is very important in the human history, 7,000 years old, but we're going to be 70% urbanized by 2050. Nepal is experiencing a rapid urban development. As you saw, the World Bank data of 21% and Nepal's own data of 66%, 2021 data. I remember when I was teaching at the Engineering Institute in Phuntsok, we used to say, oh, Nepal's urbanization rate is the total urban population is 3% of the population. So we've come a long way to 66%, even 21% is 700% more. And the sustainable and livable city, really a lot of effective management of urban components. And some elements are immediately viable in Nepal. Some elements need to come in and they will improve the urban function and quality of life. And for a newly urbanizing country, Nepal can learn from other countries and then make a really compelling urban future. That is where I'm going to stop, Suresh, and back to you on which way you want to manage it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambika ji. Thank you very much for such an excellent, comprehensive presentation, not only capturing the sort of the concept of the smart city, and thank you very much for helping clear my own conundrums. As I said, now I can put it into the context, how it fits it with the sustainability, and particularly those passive and active elements you described as an infrastructure, project deliver. I mean, it kind of, I can now put into the context in a linear programming sense also. It's very helpful. I know for everyone's benefit, I know there's some questions have already started coming in. So please, if you haven't had a chance, start putting in the question in the chat box. We'll open the floor soon, open the floor. But before we do that, there's one or two things I would like to get back to the sort of Ambika's presentation, and forgive me if I'm being a little bit sort of self-centered and selfish here. I'm going to talk about Kathmandu, for that matter, being grown there. Now, you talked about Nepal's being a very good example of the mixed use, and also you talked about the 15-minute city. I've always believed that Kathmandu used to be a sort of 5-minute city, an excellent example in the world. It could have been a global leader for a mixed use, 5-minute city, but that was way in the past. Now, in the present date, and some of your data there were that the Kathmandu city's density was, if I'm not mistaken, was about 55,000 or thereabouts.
Yes.
Population per square kilometer, whereas the Kathmandu valleys was something like 10,000. That's a 3.5 million divided by 350 square. So that's how. So for the Kathmandu city itself, 55,000, or Kathmandu Valley as a whole, 10,000. I compare that with the city I live, Vancouver, as you said, one of the sort of supposedly smart plant city. Here we have about 5,500, if I'm not mistaken, the sort of the density. And Vancouver says that the only way to go into the future is through the vertical densification. Now, if Vancouver is correct in that sense, it looks like Kathmandu has already missed the boat to do the vertical densification. And particularly because it is in a valley, it's a valley. How is it going to cope? How is it really going to sort of keep up with that adding of Bhaktapur every year? Where is it going to go? That's one question, perhaps you could probably shed some light. The other one also is that Kathmandu always takes pride in being a sort of heritage city. And at the same time, I hear people talking about, and again, so all kinds of other modern way of transportation. Why should the city and the city planners think about, as they should not think about going back and making it as much as possible non-motorized transportation and the pedestrianized city? Is it a very radical idea to think that the entire inner ring road, the ring road inside the ring road, should be pretty much a designated an empty zone? I mean, is that a far-fetched idea? What would be your thoughts about that one? Anyway, I will leave that with you. I'm sure, again, I just don't want to be limited within the Kathmandu only. I will want to sort of put forward their questions, and we'll open it.
Thank you, Suryaji. Let me briefly touch upon that. So should I stop share now? Is that a good idea? Or you want to leave the
I think
slide?
so. Yes, let's stop that so that we can put the faces here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The 55,000 people per, it was actually per square mile, and the calculation you did for the value was per square kilometers. So, but still, they're compared. The density, of course, Vancouver, that was my guess, was about 6,000, because the place that I live, Tempe, which is reasonably dense, is also 5,500 people per square mile. That's pretty dense compared to Atlanta and even Phoenix, but that's not dense enough for sustainability. So it's very simple common sense that for dwelling unit, the linear feet of the infrastructure length of drainage and water supply and sewerage, road and everything, the cost decreases if there are more people sharing the same length of infrastructure. So some level of density, I don't know what is the real sweet spot, but I would say pretty high density, like that 50,000 persons per square mile is, I think, a reasonable amount of density. Now, you don't always have to go up higher to make it very dense. You can even have like 3-story buildings that are walkable, and you can easily achieve that range of density with 3, even 2-story building. I mean, Kathmandu, even with those kind of buildings, has 55,000 person per square mile. But going high really gives you open space. That's what is the secret of Singapore, right? Then you can do water harvesting, you can reduce the urban flood, and then you can also have a lot of open spaces and parks, and you can have other public services if you go a little higher. Now, of course, I do not have a lot of expertise on structural engineering, Kathmandu soil and earthquake, and some of those things probably will limit on what would be the exact way to go, but we have seen some tall buildings coming up in Kathmandu. I would easily think what we call mid-rise here, up to like 12, 15 stories, is something I think would be reasonable in many areas in Kathmandu. So that's That would be one way that I would tackle that. The other question that you really very well asked was, of course, when we lived in Kathmandu, we could basically walk, right, everywhere. And then people lived upstairs and there was soft down below, and then restaurant next door. It was all mixed use. Now, the idea of segregating the zoning came from Euclid versus Amber Realty in 1946 in America. That's because during the industrialization period in London and New York and other places, people used to die of the smoke, and because the industries those days were really rudimentary. And then, so it was thought that industrial use and the residential use was not compatible because it was not conducive to the public health. So they came up with zoning to say that, okay, here is residential, here is industrial, here is commercial, and so on. But now we've come a long way again. Now it's a service economy. Those kind of industries are only in very few places. Most of the things that we do are like banks and offices and schools and so on. So people are now talking about actually getting rid of zoning, or at least minimizing and putting it mixed use. And that's something that Nepal can teach the world on how to really do a good, excellent mixed use, high density with low rise, and how to do something that's walkable. And like, why talk about 15-minute city? You are absolutely right. Kathmandu was 5-minute city. You can get most of those things except your work in 5 minutes. Sorry, school, right? So I fully agree. What has happened, unfortunately, is we've lost that traditional mechanism, the tacit written systems in Kathmandu, and we have not fully embraced or managed the new modern system because either we don't know how to plan, or we don't have enough money or access or expertise. We're kind of somewhere in between. That's why that's a very difficult place to be.
Thank you, Ambika. I think we have now come to our mark. We're exactly keeping with our schedule. It's now time we open it to the floor. There are already 3 or 4 questions. The first question here is it possible, it's from Meera Adhikari, is it possible to create smart cities in the foothills of the Himalayas? How do dwellers of these cities stay smart?
Okay, so very good question, Miraji. Thank you for that. Of course, it's possible to do smart cities in the foothills. We've seen it in Austria, we've seen it in New Zealand, we've seen it in Switzerland, everywhere. And again, when I said smart cities are not 100% smart, at least some component of smartness we can bring. And then I also outlined the fact that actually in hilly area, there are some plain areas, there are some benefits of transportation and certain things. But hill areas have definitely built-in natural benefit. And Suresi, you know it better than I do, because you are a civil engineer. There's a natural, the gravity is actually doing it free of cost to you. Certain things are happening to you very easily. So in the foothills of Nepal, the smartness that I mentioned is not only the mechanic aspect of it, but also the beauty, the tradition, and how people feel included and how people enjoy the city. The foothills are like hill stations. It's much easier to establish smart cities on those areas. And the technology, it's very easy these days because the internet technology doesn't really need to go through roads. It can just happen through the air and electromagnetic waves. So definitely, and even Kathmandu, up to some extent, the extended areas of Kathmandu are in the foothills, like, Buranil, and some of those areas. So, this is something that many of the nice cities these days you see in Nepal, in Pokhara and Sangza and other places, you see beautiful places on the foothills next to a river. We need to provide some basic services to start with. We cannot really think about being smart without basic urban amenities. We can call that urban planning 101. Urban planning 101 is very important. And then we can think of adding some elements of smartness and to make it better.
Thank you, Ambika. Next question. Oh, by the way, Bikramji had just sent a message to everyone. If you like to ask a question in person, please raise your virtual hand. Then I'll toggle between the text, the message question, and as well as those in person. So we now go into the second question from Drona Rasali ji. He compliments you, Ambika ji, and then basically his question is that instead of bus rapid transit, should we not plan for, this is in the context of Kathmandu, given its urbanization, should we not plan for electric rapid rail to catch up? And what's the feasibility of planning a rapid rail along the corridors of Bagmati and Vishnumati river banks? I think, yeah, and also we need to make gradual and incremental adoption of the smart city elements in the lower resource settings of Nepal. So I think if you can see that, I think the thrust of the question is that should we not be having a feasibility of rapid transit along the Bagmati and Vishnumati corridor?
So thank you again, Dronaji. Thank you so much for your good words. I'm glad that you're listening to it. We actually value you as an audience and a friend. Now, there are many people, I'm an urban planner, so I'm kind of a jack of all trades and master of none. I know a little bit about transportation. Being an architect in the previous life, I know a little more about building and some of the systems and designs. But infrastructure, transportation, of course, I work on that area, so I have good elementary knowledge, but not the expert level knowledge. People like Dr. Binod Amatya of London have been promoting an underground railway metro system in Kathmandu, and many other people have been promoting different types of systems, transportation system in Kathmandu. Now, as a planner who has worked in the Phoenix Valley the last 20 years and have seen the light rail, the rapid bus, and all of that, my feeling is there is a ladder. And this is once again, Professor Kesa Bhadrai and myself, we wrote a couple of papers on this. The ladder is as follows. So to make it smart and to make it really good, efficient transit, you start with the low hanging fruit. And that is the rapid bus transit system. Because rapid bus transit system is mostly a land use decision. And I had shown a picture of Ahmedabad. Ahmedabad has a rapid bus transit system. Basically, you dedicate the lane and you organize where the interchange happens. And then there could be a good speed of the bus, and then it runs frequently. And then actually all the way, I had done some quick calculation from Pulchok, Lalitpur to maybe even Maharajganj Hospital, you could be on the rapid bus system in about, I think, 15 minutes or something. The car doesn't take you there that fast these days. So, but you got to have a dedicated lane. So rapid bus system is the cheapest, and especially if you electrify it, it also helps reduce the pollution load. And Professor Bhattrai has actually calculated that. We have published that document, how much the load will be down, because pollution is one of the major things in Kathmandu. So that's step number one. Step number two is the light rail. Vancouver is also working on light rail. Phoenix has a light rail. Dallas has a light rail. So many, Portland has a light rail. Calgary. Light rail is also easy. It's on the ground, not the monorail on top. Monorail on top is the Hawaii thing that hasn't happened in the last 30 years. They started building it. It's very expensive. There are many, many things into it. I don't have the time to go into a detail, but monorail is very expensive. But on the ground light rail, which is like a tram in the old days, is the number two. It's a lower investment and still brings a lot of people quickly, and especially if you can electrify it. Remember that we had an electric bus system, Sureshi. Once I think you shared the picture of the Chinese trolley bus a long time ago. That's something we need to bring back. Then after the after the light rail is the metro. Metro is very efficient, but metro is extremely expensive. And then there's a lot of engineering, a lot of investment. But Delhi did a metro. I think Kathmandu can do a metro in another 10, 15 years. The planning probably can start right now. But right now, we can go to a bus rapid, and then we can begin to plan for the light rail. That would be my thoughts.
Thank you, Ambika ji. I must admit that having been involved in some of the urban transportation and the light rail, and as well as the metro systems in Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, and also some in Canada, I am completely with you, Ambika ji. I don't think Kathmandu is there yet for rapid transit. That's my personal opinion. I think bus rapid transit, it's got to go with the bus rapid transit to start with and take it an incremental. So let's move on. The next question here is from Rajan Panditji. The question is, what are the risks of rapid urbanization with an oversight on sustainability? Could you share some examples where smart cities initiatives have fallen short due to an oversight on key elements of sustainability?
Thank you, Rajanji, for that question. Urbanization is a fait accompli. We don't have any choices. We will be living urban. So rapid urbanization, of course, I showed you the pictures of the informal settlements, which are like slum. Even Mumbai is 55% of the population lives in slums. Even Kathmandu is now experiencing a little bit. So that urbanization, the number that I gave you earlier on, has to be managed. So there has to be kind of a reasonably formal type of settlement to do it. It is a fact of life. I had a professor from actually Canada who worked in China. He did some research and he was telling me that the urban income in China is anywhere between 5 to 20 times compared to the rural income. So someone who is moving from rural area to urban area, even if you live in the slum, you are much better off. I worked a lot in Kenya. So there is the slum in Kenya is very famous. I think Kenya is maybe about 3 million people. The slum has another couple million people. And they were interviewing people in the slums who came from the villages. And again, the story was the same. They were making 10 times more money in the slums and they were fine. They were sending money back home. So people will continue to come in the urban areas because of the economy of scale, good jobs, good income, and eventually a good life and opportunity for kids and so on. So it's a fact of life. We have to manage it. There are risks of not managing it properly that we have seen in Lagos, we have seen in Mumbai, we have seen in Kenya, we have seen in many other countries. I showed you the picture of Sao Paulo, and then also even Caracas, Venezuela. We don't see that in places like US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand a lot, but you go to developing countries, you see that unmanaged urban areas. That's something very important for urban planners, policymakers, anyone to actually think about and do it. And there's no simple answer to it. There is a UN Habitat which talks about the slum dwellers. Right now, there are almost 1 billion people out of 8 billion people who live in slums. That number is somewhat decreasing, but still almost 1 billion people who live in slums. And the idea is to kind of provide at least the basic minimum support and services for those people so that they can at least rent a place or build a house and have some infrastructure and have a public health. After pandemic, we realized that the public health, again, is very, very important. So designing something that is public health friendly is extremely important.
Thank you, Ambika ji. Arjunji's question is, thanks for this informative talk. It's a great idea. And I'm sure every city faces some challenges to make a city a smarter city. In your experience, Ambika ji, what might be the challenges very unique or specific to Kathmandu or Nepal only? You already alluded.
Yeah, thank you, Arjunji. You yourself live in a pretty good place. Honolulu has many good things going for it. Kathmandu's, as we all know, it's kind of, it's not a secret, or most of the Nepalese cities, except maybe a few, one or two, which have natural drainage and some reasonable settlement, we have not done the urban planning 101. So the first thing that we teach here is the subdivision and platting, Platting. In other words, you cannot sell a plot of land without the city approving the plat. In Nepal, you can buy a plot of land just for the ownership. Somebody like they will give it to you, right? It's not a platting, it's not a subdivision. And then you can build on that in Nepal. So that doesn't help. If you want to do something here in Phoenix, first of all, you buy a land, but when you subdivide to build it, you got to plat it and go to the city. And the city has subdivision requirements, and you know this very well in Vancouver. It will tell you the roads, it will tell you how much open space to live, if it's a larger lot of land, about drainage and trees and all that stuff. And you can only build on the platted area. So, we have missed a lot of fundamental things. We're good to start with traditionally in Kathmandu, but we missed out a lot in the last 10, 20, 30 years. And people, the actual planners in Kathmandu right now are the real estate agents. We all know. They just divide the land and it doesn't go to the city for subdivision. So subdivision and platting and initial zoning and land use 101 that we teach here, and in Nepal also these days we teach, are the most important. We missed that. So we've got challenges to undo a lot of things. And it's not a very poor place. Kathmandu is, reasonably affluent. Nepal's per capita income is $1,200. Kathmandu is probably $3,000. So, it's like a upper middle income place. It can be organized, but we got to go a lot of back retroactively. I think that will be the fundamental thing that we need to go through the hurdle in terms of planning and platting and subdividing places and have the basic initial infrastructure. Then we can talk about smartness and a lot of other things.
Thank you, Ambika ji. Now, Parthaji, I'll come to you. As an urban planning expert, and as I said, I cited your city as being a very exemplary and successful bus rapid transit that Canada dearly sort of, copied and implemented from. Would you like to comment on the previous question about the, and what Ambikaji's answer about the appropriate transit mode for Kathmandu Valley?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. Yes, I do have some research also experience on lineal transit system for Kathmandu Valley, but I have no opportunity. I did have the opportunity to work on public transit on public transit system, but based on the research that I did some times ago, I fully support the idea that it is too far for Kathmandu Valley to think about the underground rapid transit system kind of metro or similar. Even the one research I did a long time ago, maybe probably back in 1996, which the research was based on the Kathmandu data itself, which shows that there is a threshold value of the income that makes even the LRT system very expensive and unaffordable to Kathmandu residents. That time it was 20 rupees an hour, an average income of the Kathmandu people. But now it has gone to 120 maybe, but still is far below than what is required to justify the affordability of the metro if we want to make it sustainable. Like if the government can subsidize, which is not the case in Nepal, so definitely it has to more or less self-sustain. In that case, we can't go for metro, and bus rapid transit probably is the way to go. And I checked that in one of the works that I did for Kathmandu Valley Development Authority sometimes ago, that there are still opportunities, because given now we have Ambikaji mentioned about the hospital, teaching hospital to say city, and then cross-town corridor to Saddobato and the ring road to the south. Now that we have, before we have only 2 lanes, now we have 4 lanes road corridor. That means we can at least assign 2 central lane to bus rapid transit, given there is a political will. Without political will, bus rapid transit does not work, because it is about snatching the road space who the rich people are using it, right? So there is a lot of political issues there to make it feasible, but technically that is feasible, but politically it is unpalatable. So we have to come with the political will, then it is possible to have a bus rapid transit even in the existing road corridor. That I think that much I can say now.
Next question is from Naresh Koirala Narestai. For the benefit of those who do not know our forum TRR and Narestai, I think it is worth I should mention that this today we are having this program under the aegis of the Reading Revellers Club TRR, which is actually an online extension of what we call Reading Revellers Club of Vancouver, in other words, the book club. And the founder and the sort of the brainchild of the book club in Vancouver was none other than Narestai. So the reason we are here today, the reason data is because Narestai had this idea of having a book club, and this is what led us. I mean, it's been what, 20 years or thereabouts. So anyway, as just as a background, a primer. Now, Narestai, since you are on the sort of video, do you want to pose your question in person, or you want me to read through the text?
Well, it may be easier for me to speak instead of reading it, if that's all right.
Absolutely, please, that prefer.
Okay, well, I want to start by complimenting Ambika for an excellent lecture. Like I wrote in my chat, I felt like I was sitting in a classroom, listening to my favorite professor speaking on on my favorite subject. So that's how good it felt. And thank you, Ambika. It was comprehensive, it was substantive, and it was meaningful and relevant. So that's great. Having said that, I've got a couple of questions. One is, we're talking about Nepal when Kathmandu's mayor Bal Sundar or Chirbabu from Patan started talking about smart city. I started asking myself, what does it mean? And then I spent a lot of time trying to understand what smart city is, and eventually I couldn't come up with anything that really will tell me what are they talking about. And now you have clarified that in a lecture because you told me that there is no universal definition for the word smart city. If there is no universal definition, then Chirbabu's smart is different from Balsundar's smart. Balsundar's smart could be different from Balan's smart. And that for a lay person like me would be very, very confusing. Now, listening to you, and thank God you sort of defined it, but as you admitted, it's your definition by some learned professors, which you relied on, and all of that. Now, my problem, if you like, is all the elements that make a smart city, which you have listed, they are parts of what I would say in a modern setting, a good urban planning. And if that is so, instead of trying to encapsulate all of that in two words, smart city, which nobody understands, why not say just the way people used to say it? And that's one question. And the second question is, in a resource-starved country like ours, if you are aspiring to be a smart city, fulfilling all those, meeting all those requirements, then would you assign priority to one element of the city, smart city, than the other? I think I've spoken enough, I think, for the time being anyway.
Thank you so much, Naresh. Coming from you, that's for your good words. I really appreciate that. Mean a lot to me. Your questions are very, very well founded. In all these professions, there is sometimes a fad, sometimes a jargon, sometimes a new word. We talk about a lot about sustainability since 80s and 90s, and we realize that this was something that we've been doing anyway, but now we provide a focus by saying this is sustainable. This is something that is kind of commonsensical type of thing, but we do sustainability. I think what that does is that helps focus and channel some of the ideas into one particular very important value. So sustainability then become a very important value. We've been practicing poor societies like Nepal or the indigenous society out here. When you go back and look at their practices, they are as sustainable as theoretically you can do a PhD on, right? So Nepal's situation was also reasonably good, even in terms of the smart cities. Now, actually, because of the time limitation, I didn't go into a lot of detail, but smart city actually arose from the concept of the smart growth that they begin to define in America in the 1990s. And that was the answer to the sprawl in Los Angeles and many of the suburban areas like Atlanta and Phoenix. The sprawl was not good for anything because, it was really bad. So the smart growth meant make it compact, bring it in so that you can provide road and infrastructure and so on. And so there are smart growth regulations in Arizona, for example. The first one was Maryland. And then the smart city concept arose out of that to make it compact, efficient, smaller place, arrest the sprawl. And so I agree with you. The smart cities are any good cities, good planning cities. But does help you to focus in terms of efficiency, in terms of the digital real-time information data, and also it gives you a new meaning to all these passive design that you used to do, that you can really make it smart. That means lean, it has an answer. So I agree with you that it's not a word that does any really big innovation, but just like, from phone we came to smartphone, which gives us answers in real time. So smart city is also now kind of important from that perspective. The other one very quickly is, although there are no universal definitions, but there are some basic ones that everyone agrees upon. So even Chiri Babu and Balanji would agree to some basic elements of the Internet of Things and smart parking and smart transportation system and some good passive planning. So it will still help. I sometimes think a little differently about the use of smart city that Nepal and India has used. India has 100 smart cities program, but I think it still has some value. So that would be my thought on that, Naresh.
Thank you, Ambika ji. We now got just about 3 minutes left of our scheduled time. We have got one very interesting question, and also I see another hand being raised. So we'll try to accommodate as much as possible, unless the host, the organizer tells me that we can go beyond the time. We may have to cut it. But anyway, next question is from Praveen Joshi ji. Praveen ji, I'm going to read your question anyway in summary. So Praveen ji is basically saying that, well, while complimenting Ambika ji, that basically any city can progressively transition towards a smarter one. However, of the 15 largest populated cities, 12 are rather dumb, not smart. So his question is, how do you rank the following issues for not being able to score smart city? Again, citing Nepal as an example. Number one, technical knowledge or technical capacity, perhaps, policies, budget or finance, education, politics, and issues related to sustainability. So in terms of, I guess this kind of a matrixing is saying that technical knowledge, policy, budget, finance, education, politics, and the sustainability issues. How do you rank those?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, sometimes they are all important. It's hard to really rank, because the idea of the smart city has to start with the political will, like Parthaji said. And then, of course, you got to have some basic level of technology and basic level of resources and person power to manage and organize it. But then that technology becomes very important. So ranking, if I shift the definition of ranking, sometimes ranking is a little tricky thing, but we love ranking. Everyone loves ranking. And Economist Intelligence Unit and so many other rank the best cities in the most livable cities in the world. And you guys in Canada and Australia always beat everyone, and a couple of North European countries. But there are some Swiss management associations who also rank the smart cities. And again, they do a matrix and they look at the amount of technology, the governance, the e-governance system, participation of the people, democratic credentials, the quality of the infrastructure, and a lot of those things. And then whichever way you count it, sometimes 10 or 5 are always the same old suspects. It's Helsinki, it's Auckland, it's London, it's San Francisco, it's Seoul, it's Singapore. Those things always come up. In Nepal, we are pretty much at the bottom. We got to start. I said we had some traditional resources and assets. Maybe these days they call it a traditional design in America. That's a new term that traditional neighborhood design is the new term that they use in the old cities, just to make it compact and traditional. So something that I think we can build on what we have. That is why I appreciate when I read Balan trying to go into the Dhungedhara and many of the assets that we already had, and also the social capital that we had.
Thank you, Ambika ji. So Bikramji has very kindly, generously allowed us to carry on beyond our 90-minute time slot. So the last hand raised was Dronaji. Dronaji, yours. You want to put a question? Muted. Dronaji, please unmute. Okay.
Yeah, I already asked a question through chat box anyway, because Dr. Ambika Adhikari is presenting. Definitely, I should speak also a few words. to give him credit on this fantastic presentation. Basically, today, Ambikaji really clarified a lot of things, especially the definition itself. He made it really clear that smart cities are not just modern cities. They have a lot of traits, there are a lot of characteristics they go with it. So smart actually term was coined not just for smart, the English word, it is also an acronym actually. It has a lot of meaning. For example, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. All these are incorporated in all the parameters that Ambikaji mentioned. In Nepal, the word smart city is very catchy. In Nepal, especially politicians or even general public, they go with the whimsical ideas. If there is a new catchword, they go with it and they try to use it whether they understand or not. That's what Naresh Dai was trying to point out. Basically, they should really understand what is the matter. Ambikaji underlined so many aspects, all sectors. Smart cities actually encompasses all sectors, including public health. Public health is a big part of actually smart city, as he has outlined. Similarly, infrastructure is definitely one that everybody can understand. Economy, politics, political will, pathology, emphasize. There are so many parameters. And when planning for smart cities, my perception is that we should really do a huge operational research to optimize all the parameters based on the data. And data collection becomes very crucial. I being the epidemiologist and working really on data of cities of BC, British Columbia, a lot of parameters, demographic, socioeconomic, and environmental, all these factors. I see the importance and really you have touched and very comprehensively. It's not to ask questions, just to comment that you have covered such a rich content. If this is recorded, then it can be actually kept for use for a long time. Many people, even politicians, can be educated through this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhruvaji.
Thank you, Dhruvaji, for your commentary. I think I believe this is being recorded. Yeah, it is recording. I can see that. So I think we have come to the end of the questions as far as I can see. So it's an opportunity, last minute call. If anyone wants to comment, compliment, or share it. Ajayji, I see your hand going up. Please, the floor is yours. Unmute, please. Ajayji, unmute, please.
You're muted.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Suresh. Well, excellent presentation, Ambika-ji. Lots of information and data there. I'm just wondering, I mean, picking up from some of the ideas that you presented, I was wondering if it is possible for a less developed city with far less population than the bigger cities with much larger population to be smarter. The reason I'm asking this is that about 12, 13 years ago, I was in Manitoba, which has a much smaller population than Vancouver and is considered somewhat, and not too far behind, but somewhat less developed than Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. But I was quite impressed when I was there that the transportation, the transit system seemed to, even at that time, seemed to be much advanced than here in Vancouver. One of the things that I saw there was the real-time updates on the transit systems. I mean, there are electronic signboards telling the passengers in such and such time the bus will be arriving, and so there would be the countdown. And I was looking at it, 10 seconds, 9 seconds, and down to 0 seconds, and lo and behold, the bus was there, right on dot. I have not seen that in Vancouver still now. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is that is it possible for Kathmandu, which has fairly larger, population size, but much far behind in terms of the services and development and services to the city residents, to be smarter, at least in one respect, which is the smarter, traffic road traffic system. Because every time I go to Kathmandu, it seems like it's worse than before. So if I could hear some of your thoughts, Ambika, I would appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Ajay. Absolutely. There are many developing countries, cities like Kigali in Rwanda and some of the other cities in Africa that have, even Addis Ababa, they have adopted successfully some of the smart elements of the city. They're pretty well known for the light sensors, the bike lanes. Actually, a lot of these real good ideas about the smart city originated in Brazil, to Curitiba in Brazil, and also Bogota in Colombia. I mean, these are not the richest countries in the world, right? And the rapid bus system originated from Bogota, from Curitiba, where the mayor was the planner. I think his name was Lerner. He became very famous. World Bank invited him. So, there were books written about him, and America copied a lot of things from there. So things can happen, innovation can happen in many places. Nepal also has many things. We know that in tourism and trekking, there are many areas that Nepal has innovated. And some of the older technology that now people are researching about, all these Dunge Dhara and all that Kathmandu people have innovated. So all these things can happen. So I can list at least 5 or 6 things that are low-hanging fruits that can happen in Nepal within the coming 3-4 years. People like Balin can actually implement it. So the Parthaji is an expert on transportation. Urban transportation can be smart. It doesn't cost a lot of money. The computing and the technology is there in Nepal. It can help flow the traffic better in terms of the traffic lights. The other one, the example that you gave in Manitoba, is basically you can have an app, and many of the developing countries also have the app on the phone to tell you which buses are coming. It's basically just organizing and having the database in the bus system and your app, and then this could be kind of pretty easily done. Even Manila is doing it. So that's another thing. The third is parking is a problem in Nepal also now. And making parking smart is the easiest thing, right? Crossing the road smart was innovated only about 15 years ago, where you can see the counter. So you know how much time is left to make a decision. That's a real time. That was something that started, I think, in Cambridge, Mass, and now it's everywhere, right? Those are kind of very simple things that we can do. And then even in Kathmandu, you'll see there's a lot of like solar panels among the light on Baneswar and all that. Many of them, I think they're beginning to do the LED bulb. You can put a smart sensor that it only lights when it's dark. And then, so there are many of these kind of things, and the passive things are the easiest. They are the real low-hanging fruit. So we used to do passive system very well in Nepal. The public plazas, the shaded places, the walkways, we ruined it, but we can redo it, right? So I will start with maybe 5 or 7 list of things, which maybe different in Pokhara, maybe different in Dharan, different in a few places. But definitely we can start some of those elements. No city is 100% smart, not even Singapore or Seoul, and no city is 100% dumb, right? Even the big cities are not the dumbest. It's a gradient, and we can try to be Helsinki or Auckland, but we can do a few steps. So that would be my thoughts. And here, where we work, where I work in Phoenix, we do a lot of those things one at a time. We, the engineers, the transportation system, the architects. Now we have urban forestry. Among the smart city element after the pandemic is also like the urban forestry and urban garden. And that's something that we really encourage here. And I know Kathmandu does one of the best. Actually, UN has written a book on Kare Sabari in the roof agriculture and balcony agriculture in Kathmandu as a case study for throughout the world. So there are certain things we are doing.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambika. If I may take the liberty to quickly pick on a couple of things that Ajay mentioned, my anecdotes. One, Winnipeg and that system that, the bus timing system. Because my predecessor company was involved on that one very early stage. So I was told that it was basically a result of necessity being the mother of invention, because Winnipeg being so cold in the winter, they would, at some point they made a policy that, you know, people should not be waiting at the bus shelter for more than these many periods. So in order to do that, goes back to 90s, or it might even be late 80s or 90s. They said, what can we do to alert the people about this bus timing? So it is this Winnipeg's bus system, and I think that Dronaji would be able to confirm, and otherwise it predates the app. You know, it was there long before all these apps came in. So thanks to that. About the Nepal's traffic system, in fact, again, among us, Dr. Partha Parajuli is here, who has actually, spent quite a bit of a time helping some of the agencies there about having the smart traffic system, or at least conceptualizing those in Kathmandu. But again, I guess it's probably a work in progress or fell through various political thing. We won't be able to have a complete discussion on that one in tonight's forum. Maybe some other time we'll pick it up. It's not that there hasn't been a sort of, you know, it's been thought about and worked on it. It's just sort of walking the talk seems to be a biggest problem in Nepal trying to do anything smart. Like Ambika ji earlier alluded, I mean, for all the talk about rapid transit, this and that, for crying out loud, even if you can sort of resurrect the trolley bus system and just put 2 dedicated bus lines from north to south radial, I mean, that thing should be able to done in about at least 6-7 months of preparatory time, right? But there has to be a political will. Anyway, I think, well, there's a Kesavji has responded to Ajayji's question, also saying a better version of app was developed by one of the students to display, and you mentioned, okay, in the Samsung phone. So I guess, I think come towards the end of the program, we're sort of around 13 minutes outside of our...
Can I have a word, Suresh?
Please, Nariste.
All I want to say, I want to take this opportunity to say namaste to some of our friends I had seen for a long time. Parthaji, for instance. It's almost 10 years or 12 years since I haven't seen him. So hello to Parthaji. And Ambikaji I haven't seen for a long time. And also to you, Suresh, you complimented me for the book club. But book club would not have lasted for so long without someone like you, who has been a stalwart, a dedicated member, and many others. So I just happened to be there. That's all. That's my role. Just happened to be there. And also to Bikramji for taking us so far. It's been wonderful to have TTRL and us join hands together and do what we're doing now. So this has been fantastic. Thank you, Bikramji.
Thank you, everyone, for this great opportunity, and thank you for all those great questions, and Sureshji being a very kind host, Bikramji. And like Narista said, lots of good people that we've seen. Parthaji's Nepal's loss was Canada's gain. Canada's loss was Australia's gain. But I also wanted to add that Professor Kesav Bhattarai of Missouri, he is a forester by profession. Then later on did GIS and geography, PhD from Indiana University. He and I collaborate on many things together. So even the paper that was referred to here is something that he and I co-authored. So I've learned a lot of things from him. I'm very grateful to my collaboration with him. And a quick end is I studied in Baroda in Gujarat, and that's one of the smart cities in India. And then also Ahmedabad, which is adjoining, and I visited them very recently. Ahmedabad is also very congested and difficult like Kathmandu. Even now you can see cows and everything in the center. They have a dedicated rapid bus system. So if they can do it, Nepal can do it. Because if Auckland can do it, Nepal may not be able to do it. But if India can do it, Nepal can do it. So that's my last one.
Thank you, Ambikaji. Bikramji, I yield the floor to you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Reading Revellers series. It's been great to have Ambika Adhikari talk about smart cities in a Nepalese context. The concept itself, the opportunities and challenges for a country like Nepal. I've seen a lot of new faces today, and I'm so grateful to all of you for attending here today. I hope that we can stay in touch. So I posted the links for our programs wherever you can find us online. We use Facebook a little bit. We are also on LinkedIn. We post our videos on YouTube. So you should expect to see this program come on YouTube maybe in a few days from now. Other than that, again, thank you very much, and please stay connected with us. We do send emails out to the members of the Reading Revellers. So if you'd like to stay up to date, please drop in your emails either in the chat here or send us an email or just send us a message through the Reading Revellers as you find them online. And again, thank you very much. It was great to have you all. We have a few more series coming up this season, so stay tuned. And we hope to see you in the next Reading Revellers series very soon. Thank you very much.